Hi everyone, this is Fred. So today's video is not exactly a tutorial, it's more like a case study. I will show some illustration I just did, and I will explain about the process, my workflow. I will also give you some tips which I hope will be useful for you. But it's not exactly a step-by-step, it's something about general rules that I apply. So here's the illustration. The illustration is a scene, epic funny scene. It's a fight about to happen between two characters inside a spaceship. So on the right you have the Captain Eggplant, who is the hero, and his arch enemy is on the left, the Baron from Broccoli, who's the bad guy, and of course he will lose. And so I make this kind of funny scene that I like to do with characters which are both cartoony and also with shade and volume aspect. So we will see how to build it, the characters, the background, so let's do it. Okay, so everything with my work, because I'm very old school, start with very rough, very loose sketches. As you can see, the two characters at the beginning, they were not supposed to be in the same scene, because I was just about drawing Captain Eggplant. It came to my mind like this, this kind of eggplant superhero. So I start with him, and then I say, okay, let's do some kind of illustration, some kind of scene, a little bit epic, comic epic. And so I also create on another paper sheet the Baron from Broccoli. As you can see, his position, the Baron right arm is not totally accurate, and is also not the final position. So this is very rough, very loose, but this is always how I start. I cannot start whatever is digital painting or vector drawing. I cannot start directly like this, so I need really to sketch and to have my idea. Then the second step, I take some tracing paper, the good old tracing paper, and some ball pen. You can see some little stains there, and I give some tries to refine. And what is good also is I still at that stage, even if it's a traditional paper and pencil and pen, I can still change some of the settings. So you see that, for instance, here we have the gun, and I would try to make it a little bit cleaner, and I was thinking about the hand of Baron from Broccoli, and you will see that his arm will be there in the end. So this is the second step of my work. And the third step was to create the scene itself. So I chose to create some dynamic. I create some one-point perspective. It helps me to create a space very easily, and to focus on really the really two-side opposition between the two characters. So that's why I wanted to one-point perspective, because it's symmetrical. So symmetry is in the characters and also in the scene itself. Not a perfect symmetry, because the features on the right and on the left are not exactly the same, but like the two characters are not exactly the same, but this is roughly the idea. Opposition with something in the middle. In my final vector drawing, I chose on purpose not to put the one-point perspective in the center of a screen of my image. It's a little bit shifted on the right, so it's a little bit more space for Captain Eggplant, because he's a hero. So you can use this symmetrical feel, but you can just shift it a little bit. It's less boring and a little bit less predictable. So as you can see, I use some raster software on my tablet, and I make a quick color search. This is the last one, because I try some different colors for the Baron from Broccoli outfits. But so I use Affinity Photo in that case. You can use Krita or whatever you want, and it's good because you can make some experiments. You can see where the light is coming from, and what is also the global colors you will use. So for the spaceship, I want it to be a good scene, but I don't want to be too visible, so I try to have a color that is not too bright and too saturated, and so we can see the characters more. So these are the steps I'm doing before I start to even trace my first vector line with the pen tool. I have to do all these steps. So now let's see how I did the vector part. So the first thing I do is I import, of course, my line drawing as a reference, and I will create everything in my image flat. So I will create the characters flat, very comic book style, and same for the scene, the spaceship. And then after that, once everything is built and and the lines are okay, I can start to do all the shading work, all the shading operation with using, you will see a lot of blur, a lot of gradients to try to give some volume, some nice feelings. So very simply, you have the character here. You can see I have some over position for the hand, I mean for the arm. The hand is here, and the good point, of course, with vector is you put the elements, you draw the elements separately in different groups. So I can just, I know that this one is okay because my tracing paper was built here, so we'll just build it and then move it to here. And I can say also, actually, this way of drawing can be interesting if somehow later I want to do a little animated scene, a little animation. I'm not talking about a real cartoon, but just a little funny GIF or something like that, where I can move a little bit the arm or something like that. So it's good to make them separately. It also allows you to change your mind. You have seen on the previous the first sketches that the arm was upper, etc. So you can change your mind anytime. So this one I can rotate it, I can change a little bit the proportion if needed, etc. So this is quite convenient. So the first thing you can see is you see the Baron. So it's very simple at that stage. It's very simple. Means I really do actually the line work here, and then I will just draw inside all the lines you see here. So I have the silhouette. I do a silhouette first, and then I draw the inside. So for instance, the hair are drawn inside, which means that actually this is what is the interesting part. You can see that it goes over. I don't have to be super accurate, but of course, since it's clipped inside the global head shape, you can see it clearly, and you don't have to do it. In some case, you can just copy and paste the shape. I do it sometimes, and erase the nodes you don't need. So you can see this hair, and you will see that I often duplicate them. Like you have the basic color, I will say the base color, and after I can have a gradient to give a little volume. And according to the light, we have neons on the ceiling of the spaceship, and also the noise I will use later to create this effect of broccoli head. So this is how I draw. One interesting things I did is about all this little shape, irregular shape, I want to do to make it look a little bit like a broccoli, but I want to have one head. Is easier to handle, one global head, but of course you have two different kind of design inside. So what I did is actually I just built the whole stuff here with my pen tool, which is here, and then what is very interesting is I take back this shape and I use the path sketch tool. And actually what I did is with my tablet I just draw some little irregular volume like this, and of course I did it only on this surface, and it didn't change the contour of the face. So it's quite interesting to combine these kind of elements. Second thing is what you can do. You have some choice. For instance, for the arm, I did the here. I first did actually the whole silhouette of the arm here. This is easier to build, and then I just trace some line to create all the fold and all the muscles, the clothes fold or things like this inside, which is practical because once they are there, when you move, for instance, if you just move the gauntlet, the glove, it's everything will move together, so it's interesting. And like I told you before, I can even move if I want. If I, for instance, want to move, you see the arm is quite interesting. I can change my mind anytime. Another effect interesting also is to use the shape builder for the boots and the leg. I did the whole leg, the whole silhouette, and actually when it was time for the limitation between the boots and the leg, for instance, I just used the shape builder, which means that actually I had my whole shape. I put a line here, and with a shape builder, you see I can create separate elements from a global silhouette at the beginning. So this is also very convenient. Instead of trying to have some shape that totally match here and then here, etc., etc., you just make the whole silhouette first, tack, 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 and then you trace the separation here, and you use the shape builder to choose the one you want. If you want to see shape builder, if you haven't seen it, on my isometric tutorial about how to create parts of a sphere, you can see how to use it a little bit more in details. Okay, so these are globally the thing I'm doing. Like you see right now, I don't mind all the line you can see here. They are very regular. I will use a more sophisticated profile later, but right now I just need to do that. So I have my character roughly, and then same for the captain here. You see he has been moved, but he's here. He's the captain, and the good point is that later, it's not on this version, but you can see it a little bit. You see I a little bit increase the size of his right leg because it was a little bit small. You can do this kind of changes after your sketch itself, so it's quite convenient. And you see also I changed his eye to make a little bit more fighting spirit and aggressive, but in the end I would change, you see the proportions are quite similar, I would change the proportion to make Captain Eggplant a little bit smaller. So you see that to fight evil he has to make strong efforts because evil is a little bit bigger and impressive, so and he gives of course more taste to his victory, because of course he will win, everybody guessed. Okay, so this is how I do for the characters. So you see this is right now is quite simple and basic. What I often do, in that case you see that it's the final color almost, the gloves are pink, but except from that the rest are roughly the global color. I put some flat colors, whatever they are. Sometimes in some drawings I can use any color like yellow or whatever. It's just for me some kind of zoning. So the idea is to be able to immediately identify the different shapes, vector shapes I use, so I know exactly which one is which one when I have to move them or something like that. And so the color, in that case, the color almost the final color, but in some cases I just use random color as long as they are different from for each of the shape I use. Okay, so now we can talk about the background. So, like I said previously, you see the background, it's a one-point perspective. So this is the bigger, of course I make a bigger shape. Something also is the same. If you want to do some, I was talking about animation, if you want to do some animation, you have to have some image that goes a little bit over the frame, the final frame. You can see it, I hope, the blue final frame, but I will show you. I have a cache, and it allows you to make some zoom if you want. Why not? Like animated zoom to go inside this scene, this interior scene. Why not? So this is it. So you can see that I have my it's double square actually, because I wanted to have something a little bit horizontal and to be able to cut squares if I want to display them on Instagram, for instance. You can see that I built a cache. Yeah, so this is the final frame. So as you can see, like I told you before, this is the center of the image and this is the center of the perspective. So I give a little bit more depth to the captain. I use some principle, so I have my layer with guides, and you have probably, or if not, you can do it. You remember this system I use for 2-point perspective, and of course it works for 1-point perspective, which means that this is the vanishing point here, and this is the line, the parallel line that goes to the vanishing point, and so I use them, and just moving this, I know that every time I'm going to the vanishing point, so it helps me to really create any element. You see that any element that follows the perspective rules, in that case the 1-point perspective. So this is the way I do. Luckily with VectorStyler I have a lot of tools, and especially the 4-point distortion tool that helps to do things a little bit smoother than other software. But I still need these guides, so they help me to really have my perspective, which is credible, plausible. The second part for the perspective is I use this kind of round trapezoid. I find them cool, look like a spaceship, like very classic spaceship stuff. And of course, if you follow the rule of perspective, you know that the size of the element decrease when they go further, when they get far from you, but also if the size are decrease, means also that the space in between the element decrease. So that's why I use the blend shapes. So the blend shapes is here, blend tool, and I take my first trapezoid, the size I want, and I make a bigger one. I can show you here. Maybe I will just hide, yeah, the color references, and I will hide the cache. Okay, so you have this, and of course I create some gradients, some blend from the first foreground and to the background. So, and I can adjust the space between. So it's the same. You can see it in the first perspective tutorial I did. So this is very convenient. So I did it for this, and I also use it for the neon that I did later. So create some very interesting space effect, and I like the round stuff. Looks a little bit modern, if I can say that. So in that case, and once I add my characters, like here, okay, so now we have an idea of how it will look in the end. I use my cache again, so this is, yeah, roughly, not exactly, but roughly how it will look in the end. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the shading. You can see the character of a baron here. I will start with this example of the right arm here, because it actually adds a lot of the tips and features I use. So just hide the baron and go to this arm. So this arm, as you can see, it uses several features, like some lines here, some gradient here, some blur, and some highlights with line blurred. Also some blur and clipped shape, so it's quite interesting for that. I would just use the panel and show a stroke because we'll talk about it. Very often I use this kind of profile here because it can help to give a smooth transition in the line, doesn't make them too square, it gets smooth. And in that case, even if I don't use a blurry, because the characters are still a little bit cartoony, so it's not a big deal, I want to have some subtle change of the colors, and I often use this kind of profiled line instead of just having the basic square line. So we have it here. So if you can just watch it, you can see here, I can make it a little bit more visible. You see that you change the color of here of the layer. It changed also the way the preview appear. So for instance, the arm here is interesting. You can see here I have my line. Here I have this ellipse with blur. Inside the global shape I use one concentric, which is called sometimes a radial gradient, and also I use some shape for creating the highlights. Okay, so here you have highlights. I really like to use it. Here you have another one. Usually I consider that you have the source of light, and they create some thin line in between, and very often we play with cold and warm light, so it can give some different feelings. So in that case, so what is interesting, I'd show you again, is actually this highlight that I will duplicate. I press Alt. Okay. And I take it out of the right hand. Okay, so now you can see it. So this is some trick I use very often. This line actually is a copy of the line. I copy the whole silhouette before, of course, I put all the elements, or if not, I can erase the element. And this copy, I do it because it gives the exact shape I need, which is exactly the same as this one. That's why also very often my render, some people are maybe surprised, my render looks clean, although it's not totally perfect, but it looks clean. But actually there is a lot of elements, but I copy and paste them above exactly at the same place, so it keeps a clean wireframe line view like this. And for me it's easy because it's easier because sometimes it's not easy to find your shape, to recognize them. So this shape will be clipped inside. This one, the copy here, is clipped inside the arm here. So which means that you see there is blur on each side of the line, but actually only the other one is not visible. That's why it's clipped. So it's very interesting. You have a total control of it because you can make it thinner if necessary. If you change your mind, you decide that the color is green on the left or something like that, you can change it. So it's this very interesting way because you have a total control. Like I mentioned before, the control is important, especially if you don't have the time to draw the illustration you want in a row. Like you don't have a day ahead of work and you need to do it like little step of 1 hour, 2 hours or something like that. It's my case. So it's good to be able to come back and to have a control of things without having to think, oh, what brush did I use, what color did I use, or something like that. So separated elements like this are very interesting because you can control them. Okay, so this is the principle I use. I use it here also, you can see it. Of course I have a gradient, you can see one gradient here, you have a gradient here for the biceps, and you have this is subtle, but the ellipse with a blur effect. Okay. Another thing I use also, so is also the clipped shape. You can see here there is a shape inside here which is clipped, which means like the highlights here, you won't see one of these, what is outside the glove, and I just use a blur after it, and again give some smooth transition. I can add another line like the highlight, but more subtle, less bright, to give like different levels of shade, and I appreciate this. I know that there is some gradient mesh tool, but to be honest I find it hard to handle, and I prefer to work this way. So basically this is the element I use most in my work, in this kind of illustration. So I can go back to the Baron, And for the Baron, I have something else to mention. It's the fact that I use the noise here. So in some case you can have fun with patterns and noise. I use the noise here to give these broccoli things, these broccoli pattern things. So in that case, once again, you can see with I have just the shadow here. It looks very clean, but actually there is 3 different layers. And so I have my head and my hair. So you have a hair light that you can see up, same system I just show you on the arm. So I have these guys. I have the hair themselves and the noise. So you see, I take out the noise. I still have the gradient, so I can have this feeling of the light on the ceiling of the spaceship. And so you have it, but it's quite nice. But a little touch of noise, so you can see how it looks alone like this. A little touch of noise can make it a little bit more funky, more appealing, and it looks a little bit more like a broccoli. So you can use noise as well, and very often you can mix them with some others using some fusion mode like multiply, like overlay or something like that, and it will give you some nice effect. So this is this guy up, and of course you know that we have the captain. For the captain is exactly the same thing. Like I said, I changed a little bit his eyes to make them a little bit more aggressive. Here you have some ellipses with little blur, and even if I go to close-up, it's always the same principle. Here I have my global shape, I have my shape inside clipped, I have little lines, so everything is alright. And here the interesting part is this part, the belly. On the belly, what you can see here actually is vector pattern. So in VectorStyler you can use vector pattern, and I use some warp tool. You have a large amount of warp tool here. So you can use the warp tool or the distortion tool. And using these 2 series of elements, you can make the pattern fit the volume you want to apply it. In that case, the belly of Captain. So it's quite interesting as well. And the rest is classic. Here you have a gradient, here you have ellipse with blur, etc., etc. So after, if you want to spend more and more time, because of course it's quite time consuming, that's why sometimes I'm a little bit loose on something, I don't go super deep into details. Maybe the gun could have been more detailed, something like that, but sometimes you have to also stop it, because you can spend your life, and it's interesting just to tell the story, not to spend too much time. Okay, so now we will see some other tips about the background. Okay, so we can talk about the spaceship. First thing is very simple, it's the greebles. I like to do this kind of shapes all around. What you do is very simple, you just draw the line according to, of course, your guides. Remember, we have the guides here in yellow, so you create your shape according to these guides, and after you just duplicate it, you make one dark, one bright, and it gives you this little volume feeling. It can be quite nice. Another part is the transition between the ceiling and the ground with the walls, which, as you can see, I used a trick, because if I use a gradient, I could use like a gradient here, but I would be forced to cut the shape in 2, because if I have this direction of a linear gradient, I have another one here, so it's a bit troublesome sometimes. So sometimes you want, instead of using gradient, and we will see also for the tube here, you can use actually a whole gradient. You have a subtle gradient from background here on top to here, which follows actually the gradient we have from this neon to this neon. This neon is a little bit darker than this one. We try to make some kind of transition, a subtle transition in something which is bright but not too bright, so something brighter. And then I just put some blur on the whole shape, so it has to be of course bigger, and then in that case I can have a finally quite nice transition, and it fits actually the idea of a round shape. So it gives something quite smooth, and it's very useful. So like I said, it's the same sometimes if you want to have like this kind of pipe of hose stuff. How to do that? Actually, you just trace your line, you give it a certain thickness that you want, and then you expand actually by going to the styles, and you go to expand stroke, and so you will have a shape. It will be a shape like it is now, and this shape, the problem is you can use a linear gradient here, like 3 colors, dark, bright, dark, but the problem is when you go to a corner here, the round corner, it will be a trouble. So in that case you can use the inner shadow or the inner glow. It depends on if you use from the center to the extremities, or if you want to go reverse, and in that case it would follows actually the shape, and it can be quite interesting to have this gradient all the time, and you give this volume feeling. In that case I could have had some highlights to make it even more metal, but the truth is I have a lot of details already in this scene, and I really want the character, the focus to be on the characters. So that's why I chose not to bring too much details. I want some because I like it, to make it like a spaceship, but I didn't want too much of them. So now what we can talk about is the windows here. These windows were at the beginning 2 different shapes, and then I used the Boolean union to make it one. And the reason is, once it's only one shape, although you can see that some of the nodes don't touch each other, it's the good point is you can clip things inside, and you will fit both, and mix with some effects. Like here you can see my planet, and if I move my planet you can see that it's moving on the background of both sides of my clip page. So it's quite interesting to have this, and you don't have to try to create 2 planets and to make them fit this curve and this curve or something like that. In that case you just clip inside one, so it's interesting. Another interesting thing is how I did this galaxy, this kind of Milky Way. Actually is definitely one single line. You can see I'm not lying, even not very beautiful line, but VectorStyler has real vector brushes. You can see it here. Actually what I did is I use a rough vector shape like this to create with a thick line, and I create like this, just this effect of galaxy. So I don't have to draw all the sides, and I keep something random, of course. So it was very, very fast and easy to do. The stars are just stars object with 8 I don't know how you call it, 8 spike instead of or face instead of 5, and I just use a blur, and it works fine, at least to me. Here you just have gradient, gradient, gradients, so it's very, very simple. And here for my signature I use the warp, the 4-point distortion tool that helped me to make it fit actually the perspective rules. So it's very fast. For the rest you can see the neons, just some blending shape like I did for the trapezoid here. You have this quite bright blue-gray, very bright blue-gray. This one is white, and transition in between, transition in the space, transition in the color, and transition in the size of all these elements. So this is it. So now I can just put back my my cache. Okay, so now this is how I frame it. So I have my scene, and I can just show you. I put the character for a while as just simple flat characters. So I can choose the position, so you see it's a little bit different. So Captain is a little bit smaller, but I want their eyes to look like this in the diagonal. This little star actually is the vanishing point, so it's like for me it's a little bit guide. And so I have the Captain is aggressive, he's closer to the center, so he's going to the Baron. And once I have the position I want about my characters, I just need to put the one, copy and paste the one from the other scene. And here it is. So now we have it. We have a global scene of Captain Eggplant versus Baron from Broccoli. So I hope you like it. I hope you appreciate the tips, and of course you can go to the forum of VectorStyler to ask any question about how to use the software and some of its specific features. So thank you for watching. Bye bye.